So the Eruptor just got nerfed, and I've seen many people as well as a community manager saying it was a bug. However, that's not the case, as the actual weapon balancing dev confirmed that its changes were fully intended. They just may not be final. And we're going to be reading over his responses to multiple different nerfed weapons because I've pulled some for the Eruptor, slugger, railgun, and crossbow, and then actually talk about why people are upset about these nerfs and what makes the game fun. And if you knew me from my Borderlands days, you know I did really in-depth math for that game, and I actually have some actual numbers and damage testing for you guys today. Now I'm also going to be sending this video to the dev who made this post, so I implore all of you guys in the comment section to not be rude and to actually comment your thoughts about what makes the game fun for you to play. Why do you play Helldivers 2? And just any comments about anything you have to say about this video. And again, don't be rude or I might even delete your comment. So before we go ahead and read over the dev's message for the Eruptor and then talk about what the Eruptor is now compared to what it was, I really want to talk about the balance in Helldivers 2. The balance is actually not that bad. I can take weird loadouts into squads, I can take a couple different optimized loadouts into solo, and I can win Helldive missions. You know, I can use the spear even though it's bugged, using the railgun in combination with other things, which I will show you guys later in this video. And again, I can win Helldives. Yet a lot of people try and say the balance in this game is bad and there is a meta you have to run or you can't win without using specific meta gear. Even though in my experience that's not true, because I find that teamwork and knowing enemy weaknesses is the real meta rather than specific weapons or loadouts. And honestly, sometimes we run some sort of meme builds, but we figure out ways to make it work. But I will tell you guys why I think that people say stuff like that, and it goes all the way back to the first railgun and breaker nerf, where we will pull up a dev article that came out again with that very first railgun and breaker nerf, and in the section about nerfs and fantasy it read, "I have since the game release seen many who say don't nerf, only buff," and other similar ideas. However, as a designer, I can tell you this is not a great idea, but I understand where the sentiment comes from. All too often in the games industry, the core fantasy and what makes a weapon feel good and fun is ignored for the sake of balance. I believe players are scared of nerfs because it'll ruin the fantasy of a weapon, ruin their fun. It is extra important for us to tread carefully so that we don't ruin fantasy and fun due nerfs. We hope you, our players, will tell us when we cross that line inadvertently. Now here's the thing. I'm here to tell you guys that you have crossed that line inadvertently, because this is why people say there is a meta in the game. Every single major nerf to a gun has nearly gutted it, if not severely stunted it. And even some of the nerfed weapons have received buffs since then. And just in general, they have fallen off completely and people don't really use them much anymore. The breaker, the railgun, the slugger, the crossbow, the Eruptor, the quasar cannon, the Patriot exosuit, and the arc thrower, and there's probably a couple more. There are even some guns that had negligible nerfs, which ended up being just fine. Mainly the ones to the total ammo magazines and stuff like that. But the thing is, these are the major pain points for most players in my opinion. And this is why people say that there is a meta. Not necessarily because the game's balance is really good and there actually have been a lot of buffs, but because these nerfs really stick in their head. And the thing is, the main reason that people use meta guns or meta gear or stuff that's gotten nerfed, most notably at launch when people were spamming the breaker and the railgun, was because everyone was saying that the other weapons just weren't good. And I kind of want to prove this because let's take a look at the list of support weapons. And if we just look at this list, 6 out of 12 of the original support weapons in the game have been buffed since then. And the amount of buffs in general in this game far outweigh the amount of nerf. And for the most part, the game's balance as a whole is much better now compared to at launch. And that's why I'm saying the game's balance actually isn't that bad, because so much stuff has been buffed since launch, but most people are still stuck on those nerfs. And again, a lot of these nerfs have severely impacted or gutted some of the weapons, which has upset the players. And in my opinion, almost all these nerfs could be almost completely reversed. I do think some of the nerfs were okay, like with the railgun. I think the charge to safe and unsafe mode is fine. I think some of the ammo reductions is fine. But in general, a lot of the more severe nerfs could be reversed and they would fit just fine in today's meta now that you guys have buffed all these other weapons. And the other thing too is a lot of these nerfs seem to be due to popularity rather than strength. So let's go back to that very first dev article and let's read the note of the breaker. And it says, when we looked at the breaker and the data we have on usage, it painted a picture of a well-liked weapon that was great at killing chaff and generally had a few more kills than other weapons. It was, however, not necessarily better at making you succeed in a mission, and no real damage nerfs were warranted. The calculated total damage per mag was quite high compared to some of the other weapons, and something that could be reined in, while reinforcing the intended fantasy. Now, to me, especially in hindsight, that, again, a ton of primaries have been buffed since then. To me, this meant that this was a popular gun that they wanted to nerf, even though it was only apparently barely outperforming other guns from what they said. And now the main reason people don't use this gun anymore is because it reloads so often now. It's honestly still one of the best chaff clear weapons in the game, but it's much less fun to play with because you're reloading so often. And if it only barely outperformed the other weapons in the past, then giving it a nerf, as well as buffing so many of the primary weapons now, in my opinion, you could reverse the nerf, give it its ammo back. And go ahead, leave the recoil there. That's fine. It's a crazy automatic shotgun. At least meet us somewhere in the middle. So now I want to pull up and read this dev note on the Eruptor. So one of the main weapon balancing devs in the Discord said, so to summarize, number one, after we fixed the ricochets, people started looking into it, testing Eruptor more, and confused ricochet for shrapnel. So we got a bunch of false reports about projectiles being reflected back at you. Number two, we investigated it and found no proof of the ricochet thing. We did, however, find that Eruptor shrapnel could randomly kill you or your teammate, as we didn't want that for a primary. Number three, we removed the shrapnel to make the weapon more consistent. And I still stand by my opinion that 40 damage always is a good trade-off for 100 damage randomly. This affects AoE damage, and direct damage stays the same, so it was supposed to be a win-win for all. And number four, by doing that, we also unknowingly removed an exploit that players used very consistently to deal more damage than we intended. Yes, that's an edge case, but no, I haven't considered it. So here's what I think we should do. We can't bring the shrapnel back the way it was. We don't want it to one-shot chargers, and we don't want it to have a chance to kill you or your teammate. I still strongly believe that the Eruptor benefits from dealing less damage more consistently. So it's a net minus if you're lucky or you're using an exploit, and a net plus otherwise. Now, my issue with this is I feel there is a large misunderstanding of the weapon and what actually makes it fun from the weapon balancing dev themselves. Because now that the shrapnel is missing and the gun is absolutely gutted at this point, can we stop acting like what the dev said about the shrapnel not being the main form of damage was essentially just a lie? The dev says 100 damage randomly versus 40 damage always. But what you do is you skill shot the gun in such a way that all or most of the shrapnel hits an enemy. For example, you don't want to shoot a brood commander in the head. You wanted to shoot it in one of the armpits of its front legs. That way, the impact deals damage to the leg, some of the shrapnel hits the body, some of the shrapnel hits the head, and it's overall enough damage to one-shot it. Same with Devastators. If you shoot them in the chest, it wouldn't one-shot it. But if you shoot them in the armpit or you pull off the crotch shot, impact would deal damage to that spot, shrapnel would hit the chest, some on the top of the shoulder, it would end up one-shotting it. If you see a group of enemies or a patrol, you don't shoot the front enemy in the group. You shoot further back and let the shrapnel go all around and hit all the other enemies, not necessarily one-shotting them all, but by the second shot it would do it. Now, one other thing I gotta throw in here is when the AoE was sucking enemies in. The first shot would suck a group of enemies all towards each other, and then the second shot would delete the group. So the Eruptor actually got a nerf from a bug fix, as well as getting nerfed, and honestly it felt fine after the nerf, but more on that in a second. Now, you could also shoot this underneath a charger to make all the shrapnel deal damage to the charger. In my opinion, it didn't consistently one-shot the charger when you shot underneath it, but point being, you can definitely see how much more powerful the shrapnel was compared to the AoE. So it was not 100 damage sometimes, it was more like 500 or 1,000 damage sometimes, at least on the original Eruptor. And like I said, the thing is, after the first nerf, I even posted a video testing all of the nerfed guns, and in my opinion, in this video, I said you can significantly feel a difference between when the Eruptor launched to what it was after that first nerf, but also it was not gutted at that point. It could still one-shot things with the shrapnel skill shots, and I still gave it a low S tier, a high A tier. My issue with it at that point was that it wasn't actually killing stuff close to it, so that's when it did start to become a bit more random. But now, with the shrapnel removed, the Eruptor is literally the same damage as the crossbow, by the way, but with slower fire rate and a larger AoE, and we definitely know how everybody feels about the crossbow right now. The identity of the Eruptor was simply the shrapnel. If anything, they could have just removed the AoE to nerf it instead, and the randomness of the shrapnel, along with the skill shotting it, would have been a much more fun and strong way, as well as an identity for the gun that was different from all of the AoE guns. Another thing worth noting is it shoots far too slow and it only has 5 in the magazine. The only reason that original mag nerf made sense was with the power it had even after the initial nerf to the damage and the shrapnel. Alright, so now let's talk about the Railgun, where I actually did some damage testing to support what I'm saying, and you would be surprised that the Railgun only needs a 40 to a 60 damage buff to become completely viable in the meta instantly, but it also wouldn't overshadow anything. So the Railgun does 120 damage at a 90% charge to heavy armor, and the EAT, the recoilless rifle, and the quasar all do 800 damage on impact to heavy armor. So what I was testing one night was how much damage does it take to kill a Bile Titan head, because we all know that 2 rockets will kill a Titan, but I wanted to see what the minimum amount of damage I could deal to a Bile Titan head and see how many shots of a Railgun after 1 rocket would kill it. And it turns out that 1 EAT and 1 90% Railgun hit kills Bile Titans if you land them both on the head while the Bile Titan is not spitting, by the way. And this was pretty cool to me, so I've been playing EAT and Railgun the entire last week on stream pretty much. By the way, turn on notifications down below and come hang out in the stream. Now, I was doing this just because it's satisfying to feel like I'm one-shotting Bile Titans with a Railgun, even though I'm really not, because I am shooting EATs at it. And it's actually pretty challenging because I'm actually gimping myself in my build by bringing 2 support weapons. And you would say to yourself, that actually looks pretty dope. That's a cool combo, right? Except, why do I have to bring EATs with my Railgun to make it viable? It is literally a heavy penetrating weapon. It honestly makes no sense, and it really works better as a team strategy. However, it is an extremely unoptimized combo, as well as the fact that it takes a 90% charge to kill the green medium bile spewers right now. The Railgun isn't even necessarily great against every medium enemy in the game, and it takes 3 90% charges to a charger head. So, back to the numbers. EAT does 800 damage, the Railgun does 120 damage. We can basically theorize that the Bile Titan probably has 920 damage to its head, and we'll divide that by 120 for the Railgun damage. It currently takes 7 2/3 shots of a Railgun, and this translated over to when I tested the Railgun after the buff. It took me 8 shots while the Bile Titan wasn't spitting. Now, how would we buff the Railgun? How many shots do we want it to kill the Bile Titan? Well, I would say 5 or 6 shots to a Bile Titan head, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Now, if we take 920 divided by 6, that gives us 154 damage. If we take 920 divided by 5, that gives us 185 damage. So the Railgun only needs 35 damage to 6-shot a Bile Titan, or 65 damage to 5-shot a Bile Titan. It would instantly be viable within the meta again. And let me tell you why. Because then you would be able to 5 or 6-shot a Bile Titan head. And here's the thing, anti-tank launchers would still be a better option since they are only 2 shots to the Bile Titan head. Here's the other thing. Keep in mind, the Railgun has a 3-second charge time to 90%, as well as the fact you can really only shoot Bile Titans while they aren't spitting right now, because when they are spitting, their forehead weak spot goes back into their armor. And also keep in mind, there's a risk of blowing yourself up, or you might have to shoot early. There is some timing to this weapon. And here's the other thing. Even if you buffed the Railgun, it would still take 1 Railgun shot and 1 EAT to kill the Titan. It would just make it so that when you can't set up that combo, you can take down a Bile Titan in a pinch. It's kind of like when you're fighting gunships and maybe they kill you once and you lose your support weapon, you can actually take them down with dominators, or you can take them down with scorchers. But guess what? It's really hard to take down gunships with a railgun because you have to charge it up and they actually fire at you and try to stagger your shot. And here's the other thing, railgun already one-shots hulks. So if we were to buff the damage, it wouldn't even change anything against hulks. It's already one-shotting them. It's already one-shotting Devastator. Nothing for the railgun would change about what it can already do. It would just help it when you are by yourself and you're in a pinch. That's the whole point of it, is when you end up by yourself, you end up not being able to set up your combo, it feels completely useless, and it feels like you might as well have brought a different support weapon. And I would make the argument that there is not a single thing that the railgun can do, except for one-shot hulks, that another support weapon could do better. And again, here's the other thing. Yeah, the railgun can one-shot hulks, but guess what? The AMR can two-shot them. The autocannon can two-shot them. The laser cannon kills hulks in like 2 seconds. Except all those other weapons I just named can kill factory striders 10 times faster than the railgun. They can kill gunships at least 4 or 5 times faster than the railgun. The autocannon is 2 shots to kill a gunship. The laser cannon is 3 seconds to kill a gunship. The AMR is 4 shots to kill a gunship. The railgun, you're sitting there charging shots to 90%, and trying to take down a gunship, it's a little bit ridiculous. Point being, nothing would change against smaller enemies, it would simply make it better against bigger enemies. And guess what? A lot of people would literally still call it trash and stick to their quasar cannon because that's what they like now and that's what they're used to doing. And point being, the moment this gun was nerfed, and as long as those nerfs aren't reversed, people are not really going to use this gun that much. Sure, there's a niche audience that likes being able to one-shot hulks, but at the end of the day, there isn't a single support weapon, including the heavy machine gun, that actually doesn't do better than it in every other situation. Now, something I really want to talk about is what Helldivers 2 is to me. It's a game about shooting bugs and spilling oil and having fun and memeing about patriotism and democracy and role-playing and punching my friends and team killing each other and just having a good old time. And the devs seem to know this, and they seem to lean into this when they post memes, when the CEO was saying, hey, those flying bugs aren't real. They really do seem to know this sometimes, except when it comes to balance. They seem to take the balance so seriously. Why are you even saying things like a primary weapon shouldn't one-shot a charger? And alright, I'll admit, one-shotting a charger was a little bit crazy, but I honestly never felt like it was consistent. Maybe that's a skill issue on my part. But after the original nerf of the Eruptor, I definitely didn't think it was one-shotting the chargers anymore. And you could even tell it was nerfed significantly, but it still felt fine. It was still able to one-shot Devastators, Brood Commanders, which honestly meant it was still a high A or a low S tier weapon. So honestly, what I'm just here to repeat is that I feel like the balance in the game is good overall, just from all the guns that have gotten buffed since launch. But there really is all those pain points that make people say the meta is bad or make them have a bad taste in their mouth about the meta, which at the end of the day almost isn't true in a sense, because the game honestly does feel like there's a lot of different options you can use. But in my opinion, the problem is going to come in when more warbonds come out and more good guns come out and more good guns get nerfed. The worse it's going to leave a taste in people's mouths over time. Because at this point, everybody feels like the Democratic Detonation Warbond is the worst warbond out right now. The only good thing in it is the grenade pistol. Go ahead and ask anyone, they will probably tell you that. I would say 9 out of 10 people would say that. So what I have to say to the devs is stop making things how you want them to be, like the crossbow. Crossbow, when it came out, what's hilarious is my initial reaction to it was pretty bad against medium enemies. It was actually much better at chaff clear, and a lot of other people agreed with me. They found that it was pretty niche. I would say most people didn't really like it, but actually I found a lot of people thought of it as a mini plasma punisher. It was pretty good at doing what the plasma punisher did, which was take out small groups of enemies. And my point is, if players find a way to use a gun that you didn't intend and it's not broken, then instead of changing it, how about you just lean into what players like to do with it, you know? And I really don't want to be that guy and bring up the Sony situation. Something major enough that happened that pissed off the entire community that they all came together and left almost 500,000 negative Steam reviews on your game. Well, here's the thing. Go ahead and scroll through the popular Reddit section right now. I see tons of posts about the nerfs to weapons lately. I've even seen some players still talking about the railgun lately. So I'm just gonna go back to your guys' first balance article and tell you guys, I think you've gone over the line. So that's gonna be it for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm out.